Hello there, Atheist Junior here, your friend and humble narrator, and I'm back with a new piece of content for you guys. And today I'm very excited to be taking a look at this new debate between friend of the channel, Dr. Dan Stern Cardinal versus Mr. Kent Hovind, who is not a doctor. Not a doctor. Dan is a doctor. Kent Hovind pretends to be a doctor, which is something they call stolen valor, I think. He didn't do the work to get a PhD. Like, I feel like everybody knows this, but it needs to be stated. He's not a doctor, and yet he has everybody call him Doc. Anyway, let's take a look at this. I have not seen any of this debate, so that's going to be a fresh reaction from me. And yeah, hopefully it'll be fun for you guys to watch.
For you. Okay, let's start with Dr. Dan. Dr. Dan, you probably don't need an introduction at this point, but feel free to give a brief one if you'd like to. Plug your channel, and then pick a point or a topic that you'd like to go back and forth with Kent on. Go ahead.
Yeah, hey everybody. Dr. Dan, evolutionary biologist. Channel is Creation Myths. I kind of work my way through the scientific creationist claims that come out of places like AIG and ICR and show why they're nonsense. So talk about stuff like genetic entropy or irreducible complexity, that kind of stuff. Thanks for hosting this. Always a pleasure. Hi, Matt. I think it's the first time we've talked in person. How are you?
Yeah.
The thing is the best evidence for evolution, and I think what we mean by evolution, and correct me if I'm wrong, everybody, but I think we mean universal common ancestry, right? That's kind of what we're like. We don't mean like antibiotic resistance or something. We mean like large scale, right? Am I correct in that? That's what we're talking about, right? Big scale stuff.
Yeah, yes. That is my objection.
Yeah, okay.
Because the word evolution is too slippery. You're talking about cosmic, chemical.
Not your turn, Kent. Not your turn.
Stellar, organic, macro. Nobody's seen life come from non-living material. That would be organic evolution. Nobody's seen that.
I've heard we don't need to do the script. I agree with you. Let's do universal common ancestry. Because I got it. Okay. I got the evidence right here. It's real straightforward. It's so you actually kind of went into this a couple minutes ago talking about like hypothesis testing and making predictions, and that's exactly what we can do. Donnie, can I share my screen? Is that okay, or do you want me to just talk through it?
If you'd like to share your screen, go ahead. What we'll try and do is, and you're good at this, so I have no concerns, is we'll keep it to one point or one topic at a time for now.
Okay.
It's one thing. So if you'd like to share your screen, feel free to do.
Just a PowerPoint slide. I'm not even going to put it in like a show. I'll just show you the the editable view. Okay, so this is where we can get down to it, right? The evidence we want is testable predictions that are different between the
get down to it, Hovind.
The creation model and the evolution model, or let's say universal common ancestry, because that's what we want to test. And we can use genetics to do this. And Donnie, I know you're a fan of saying that it all comes down to the genetics, right? That's the thing that actually matters at the end of the day. So what we can do is we can look at genetic sequences that are unconstrained, right? Sequences, that just means that they can mutate basically freely and there's no selection for or against. That's all that means. Me and people here will disagree on whether those sequences are functional or not. It doesn't matter because we can directly observe in the human genome and every genome that exists.
Okay, so I like that Dan introduces a term here and then tries to define it. I'm a layman, so what I got from his description there was that these are DNA nucleotide sequences that are not affected by selection pressures. The mutations they have, I guess, are just random and they aren't influenced by factors in the environment like Darwin's finches or any other example. So it's good that he defines his terms there. It's something that Kent could learn from.
We can directly observe that there are sequences where you can mutate it every which way and it just doesn't matter what the sequence is. We can document that, and we should all be able to agree on that. And I want to make sure we agree on that that unconstrained regions exist before we go any further. Can we all agree on that point before we keep going?
Now,
Yeah, I'm not sure I comprehend what you're saying, and so I'm not going to say, yes, I agree. I think that the fact that we have a complex DNA code indicates a designer. You wish
It's not,
to
no,
not
it's
have
not
a
that
designer.
though. Sorry,
Okay,
can I try again to explain it to, so basically, Kent, all I'm saying is there are parts of the genome, like there are parts of the genome where if it mutates and it changes the sequence, that hurts us, right? Like it breaks a gene, messes with a protein, and stuff doesn't work. There are other parts of the genome where if it mutates, the sequence doesn't actually matter. And you
okay, so I guess he's talking about parts of a nucleotide sequence, not the whole thing. So I guess I was mistaken on that part. I think I get it. Kent doesn't seem to understand, but I think I get it from his explanation.
could just like, you can change the sequence, that you can make it a random sequence and it doesn't matter, right? That's the thing that
Right.
exists.
Well, let me say that in the English language, there are different ways of saying the same thing. Go hop in the truck, go jump in the truck, go climb in the truck. So the fact that the English language has words that can be used, you're still saying the same thing. Are you claiming
No.
that because this genome, some parts of it are a little more flexible than others, therefore this is evidence for evolution? Is that your
No.
claim?
No, I'm just making sure we're all using the same definitions is all I'm doing right now. That's just the first thing, was just like, do we agree that there are regions? And it sounds like we do, where whatever the reason for it, we should be able to agree that there are regions where the sequence doesn't matter. That's all I'm saying. That's the starting point, because that allows us to make competing predictions for evolution and creation.
I think the gene code is so complex that we haven't even analyzed all of it. Okay, one human's DNA would stretch across the universe twice, across the solar system twice.
So person A, or somebody says, I'm talking about A. Oops, my headphone fell out. You tell Kent Hovind, I'm talking about subject A. Then Kent Hovind says, okay, do you mean subject B? And you say, no, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about subject A. He's like, subject B, let's talk. I want to talk about that. You're talking about subject B. No, I'm not. And then he just repeats himself.
Tied end to end. So to claim that we know what everything does is laughable. Okay, there may be some.
That's not the point.
So no, I'm not going to agree.
Can I ask, Donnie, do you understand what I'm saying?
I have a question,
I'm not
Dan.
going to agree.
Are the sequences?
Can I just see, like, Luca, Donnie, am I being clear about what I'm saying? Like, there are regions of the genome that
Yes,
mutate without cause. That's all I'm saying, and I just want to make sure we agree on that, because that's the basis for making competing predictions. But if we can't,
I would say in the future, if you make the mistake of debating Kent again, if you have another lapse in judgment, I would say don't bother with this, because you'll never get Kent to agree to anything, no matter unless it's something incredibly simple and agreeable. He'll never agree to it. And you'll never get him to admit anything. So I would say just move on, just make your argument and forget about trying to get Kent to acknowledge it.
Can't agree on that basic thing, then.
So it sounds like you're referring to, and I know Matt wanted to say something real quick too. You're referring to conserved regions of the genome versus unconserved or unconstrained sequences that may or may not have a function, because they seem to be more fit to endure mutations.
And I will concede, I will stipulate for the purposes of this discussion that the human genome, every genome, I don't care, is 100% functional. I will stipulate that for the purposes of this discussion, as long as we agree, which we should, because this is like obviously the case, that there are regions that can mutate without cost, right? That's all I'm saying.
Some mutate. Okay, Kent, go ahead.
Yeah. This is, I think, Ken Rock and I show tonight, but I would agree that there are quite a few variations that allow in the human genome. I would also stipulate that we'd have to agree that there are limits. There are parts of the genome that allow you to get, 6 feet tall or 7 feet tall, but none that allow you to get 4,000 feet tall. So there are limits, and I don't think you believe there's limits.
I feel like Kent isn't listening, but I'm going to keep going anyway. We're just going to try.
Dr. Dan,
I'm going to try. Well, hang on. Let me just go through. This is only going to take a minute. I want to make sure that like we can agree on premises before I actually make the argument. but I'm just going to go for it because I feel like Kent's not really listening, but that's okay. So my cursor, yeah, my cursor is visible. That's cool. Okay, so what matters here is right here in the middle, right? So if we have universal common ancestry, right? It doesn't matter if the sequence is subject to purifying selection or not. We expect to find nested hierarchies no matter what we compare, right? Because everything shares a common ancestor. Now, for the constrained sequences, we expect that to be the case across the board because you can use the common design argument. Now, I don't think that's a good argument, but I'm not arguing against that right now, right? We're not going to do that. But you can use the common design argument to hypothesize that regions that have a sequence constraint, they have to be a certain sequence, they're going to be more similar sequence-wise in organisms that are more similar morphologically, right? There's problems with that. We're not going to worry about it. We're going to accept that premise as valid, right? Now, it's unconstrained sequences between the created groups that are interesting. Because within a created kind, right, your arc things, your mating pair gets off the arc, and then they're going to have their kids and disperse and diversify and everything. That group, within that little group, you actually have common ancestry. So you can look at the mutations that occur within that group, and you'll find a nested hierarchy because they do actually, in reality, have common ancestry. For the unconstrained regions that are in different created groups, like dogs and cats and whatever else, right? Those unconstrained regions, those mutations should not be correlated with each other because there's no common ancestry. So there's no, in reality, in the creation model, there's no common ancestry between different created groups. I think that's an uncontroversial statement, right? Different created groups don't share common ancestry. Therefore, the mutations that occur in those groups should be uncorrelated with each other because mutations are probabilistic. They're not deterministic. And that means across the different groups, we don't get a nested hierarchy within the unconstrained sequences, right? That's the hypothesis, or that's the prediction that flows from the creation hypothesis. The hypothesis.
Well, Dan, maybe, and I appreciate you elaborating on your points and arguments. Maybe let's stop there for a second, allow Kent to give his thoughts and feedback. Matt, I know, wanted to give his 2 cents as well on this. So if you don't mind, unless you wanted to quickly wrap up your point.
I would have, Donnie, can you put me on a 2-minute timer?
Sure.
Hit me with a 2-minute timer, and we'll do this fast. So these predictions are important because they allow us to distinguish between the two models, right? Because in the common ancestry model, we're going to find nested hierarchies top to bottom. In the creation model, we won't. If we focus on those unconstrained sequences, if you look at this group of organisms right here, compared to this one right here, all the mutations that happen within this tree, right, this clade, this lineage, all of the mutations that happen in here, they'll form a nested hierarchy within here, but they'll be all mixed and matched and completely unconstrained with regard to the ones that happen over here. Now, in the evolution model, the opposite is true. In the evolution model, you're going to have your birds right here falling out more closely related to your reptiles adjacent to them than they will to like the apes and the other mammals. So according to within the unconstrained sequences, that's your prediction, right? Because of the fact that mutations are probabilistic. Well, what do we actually find when we try to determine the association between these unconstrained regions? We find nested hierarchies across created kinds. So for example, you can do this. This is a figure from a paper from 24 years ago. We could do this. You've got rodents making a nice, neat clade. You've got simians making a nice, neat clade. By any young Earth standard, those are different created kinds, and the sequences used to make this are not functionally constrained. So this is a direct refutation of the common design or separate creation hypothesis. If the topic is what's the best evidence for universal common ancestry, this is it. This is a directly confirmed prediction that doesn't require us to see a cow give birth to a dog, right? This allows us to look in the genomes of living things
10 seconds.
And confirm the evolutionary prediction and refute the creationist prediction.
Okay, great intro by Dan there. I would have liked for him to define the term nested hierarchies like he did for unconstrained sequences, but still, he did a really good job of explaining a complex topic. Obviously, this argument is going to be too complex for Kent, so he's not even going to engage with it. Now, I haven't seen this debate, but my prediction is that Kent is going to make the following arguments. DNA is complex. Mutations have limits. Dogs always produce dogs.
Everyone,
Okay, Dan.
Questions?
Dan, okay, Dan, thank you. That was about 3.5 minutes if I also count the first 1.5 minutes. So I appreciate it. What we're going to do is give Kent equal time, let's say 3 to 4 minutes to give his thoughts, his points. And then I'm also going to throw it to Matt as well to get his thoughts. And then Dan, we'll throw it right back to you for a rebuttal. Kent, go ahead.
When I was teaching school 15 years, I would once in a while have a student that was daydreaming and making doodling on paper and making lines on paper. And I would come up and say, hey, we're teaching algebra or trig here or something like that. Take their pen away. Dan, somebody should have taken your pen away. You drew a bunch of lines on paper claiming that there's all the relationships. All you have is lines on paper. We don't ever see a bird produce a non-bird, let alone a crow produce a non-crow. I think man has decided to take all the birds and put them into different categories based on different species. The birds don't care. They know what their kind is. But you are making a claim that birds are related to reptiles. If we go back far enough, we cannot go back, and you don't observe any of that. You believe that, and this is your religion, and you should keep your religion out of science class. If you're an evolutionary biologist, you have mixed two words together that don't belong together. Biology is things that we study about life forms. Bio meaning life. Ology, the study of. The study of all life forms is that cows make cows, dogs make dogs, birds make birds. Evolution has nothing to do with that. There's no such thing as an evolutionary biologist. You need to get a new title. And take your pen away, quit drawing lines on paper. All we see is cows make cows, dogs make dogs, no exceptions. You can imagine all these hierarchies. None of the animals or plants care how we classify them. They don't care. The dogs, when they go out looking for a wife or a husband, they look for another dog.
Except that dogs will hump anything. Dogs will hump human legs. They'll hump couch legs. They'll hump other animals. So that's not true. And also, it's irrelevant whether or not the animals care how we classify them. That's not relevant.
They don't look for a pine tree or a snail. They look for a dog. They know what their kind is. I don't understand how you guys can imagine that if I drew a line on paper connecting them, therefore it's science. That is artwork. That's not science. Go ahead.
Dan, if there's something you want to respond to there, note it down. We will give you a chance. But first, we're going to hand it to Matt. Matt, I know you've been doing some work on this exact topic, and so feel free to convey your thoughts.
Okay. I think I'm off mute. One of the things I just wanted to make sure from Dan was, sequence doesn't matter. You said, but I didn't. I wanted to make sure it doesn't matter for function, or it doesn't matter for building a nested hierarchical pattern.
It's that going back to kind of the very beginning when I started talking, I think is what you're referring to. And
yes.
It's just that there are parts of the genome where the sequence, you can literally have any sequence and there's no fitness, benefit, or cost, no matter what the sequence is. So it can freely mutate without purifying selection that's going to remove the mutations.
Okay.
They're not the whole genome, but there are regions where that's the case.
Right. So when we're talking about the constrained sequences right now, or the conserved one, which undergoes strong selection, these are the strongest constrained regions and that are basically forming this nested hierarchical pattern. So I believe that it was evolution that predicted that these nested hierarchical patterns based on genetics will follow a homology pattern. But now we know that really doesn't work so much. And the reason we say that doesn't work is because these sequences are more based on function. So like, how a hand grows as opposed to how it looks at the end. So ours is more functional based, not really homology based. So that's what the sequences we're saying are in the created version, or the created kinds version. When you look at baraminology, they're not really looking at genetics. They're just looking at morphology. We don't really look at the
It's because they can't, because genetics completely debunks baraminology.
Morphology, because that was a prediction kind of by evolution. uh, about what the sequences do. So in our model, we're saying that the sequences are formed. They might form a hierarchical pattern, but no matter where you look in the genome, even these most conserved regions, they'll form different trees. Like looking at cytochrome C, it's a great region, but you go back about 4 steps from humans, or 3 steps, you go from the gorilla to the orangutan, you actually go to a pig, and the pig is,
Oh my God, he pronounced orangutan right.
98% genetically similar in that region. And then the orangutan is 97%. Then you go to cytochrome B, and it forms a different tree altogether. So we say that evolution isn't true, even looking at these nested hierarchical patterns and looking at these conserved regions, because we would see evolution in all of them. And the reason we don't look at these highly conserved regions and we look at the mitochondria and the Y chromosome is because they don't repair themselves. They don't undergo recombination like those areas do, and they don't have the strong selection. So that I'll stop. That's too long for me. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I think I got you. So just to be clear though, the hypothesis that I'm talking about and the predictions that flow from the competing hypotheses that I'm talking about are not talking about those regions. That's a separate thing. I just want to be clear about that for everybody. So the constrained versus unconstrained are 2 separate regions. What I'm talking about are going to be like introns and ERVs and retrotransposons, stuff that, functional or not, I don't care. It can mutate and it doesn't have a cost. But
actually, Dan, if I could ask you a clarifying point, are you
This is derailing the debate, dude.
saying that the unit itself, let's take an endogenous retrovirus, are you saying that not only the endogenous retroviral sequence forms a hierarchy across the biological world, but also the mutations found in the unit itself?
So yes, and we'll get to, I can elaborate on that in a minute, but I just want to finish with Matt's thing, is that so in the unconstrained, so it's for unconstrained and constrained regions, you get these nested hierarchies when you compare sequences. We don't always get the same hierarchy, right? There's parts of the genome where you get an unexpected level of similarity. And there are a couple of different reasons for that we are aware of. So you can have something called incomplete lineage sorting. You can also have horizontal gene transfer.
I just want to read this comment really quickly. So it says, hey, AJ, I think your latest debate with Kent is one of the best ones that has been done. You really shone in that one, so good job. And Creation Myths agrees. Well, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate that, because I do feel like I really went hard at Kent in that debate, and I kind of tried to take no prisoners. And I am pretty proud of that debate. And it's getting to be one of the highest viewed videos on my channel. It's at 20K views. So thank you guys so much for watching that debate. And I'm so glad that I got those views instead of SFT. You know, that's really great. But I am pretty proud of that debate. I thought it was hilarious because Kent got so riled up. He was yelling like at several points. Like he's like, I did not study that one. Usually. But this is, I want to hear more between Kent and Dan. Like this is the problem with these open mic debates. You have too many people butting in.
You can also have some, just for whatever reason, the case is that organisms that are not most closely related end up physiologically the most similar. And we don't always understand why that's the case. There are a few regions, right, where like humans and pigs are the most similar instead of humans and chimps or gorilla, right? It's not even an ape that's the most similar. And that's fine, because
we find that with the Y chromosome too, right? The chimp and gorilla Y.
No, that's structural rather than sequence. It's
well, with the Y chromosome, if you were to consider overall gene content, architecture, and size differences, the chimpanzee Y and the gorilla Y are more similar to each other than either are to the chimpanzee Y. When you consider everything, not just content or size differences, Dan, but everything.
I don't want it. So 2 things. 1, I don't want to get off topic. But 2, you can't aggregate factors like that. It's lumping apples and oranges and bananas together in the same bucket and then comparing the amount of fruit instead of one at a time. But I don't want to get off topic. What I just want to finish with Matt's point is that yes, there are these regions where we do find unexpected relationships, but what we find is that when we generate the nested hierarchies, genome wide, and we use the largest possible regions of the genome, you end up on average finding, for example, humans and chimps, then humans and chimps and gorillas, and the primates within the mammals, and all the mammals together rather than the mammals mixing and matching with the birds, right? It's you look at these things on average.
Yeah, but I think Matt is pointing out that you do find quite a bit of lack of uniqueness in those nested hierarchical patterns when you actually start to dig a little deeper and you look at certain sequences. If you look at hierarchy there, I think what you're saying, I don't want you to similarity, but here you have the human, it's half the more so your role problem with, and some very serious.
So what first thing I want to just see, have everyone just read the reference on the right there. So it's the sex chromosomes of great apes compared cytogenetically, ideograms of G banded. Okay, so this is a banding pattern that has to do with like the density of the like proteins. It's not sequence specific. So my question is this, Donnie. There's that.
Geez, I'm sorry, but can we get back to the Kent debate?
Words that are
repetitive.
Here,
we're going to throw it right back to you, Kent, and then we'll have to bring someone else into it too.
If you compare,
Donnie, shut his mic off, please. This guy is hogging the whole problem, the whole program. Get his
no. SFT specifically had Matt interject, which totally derailed the entire debate. And Dan is just responding to the questions that he's been asked, and he's thorough with his answers. But if you're going to blame somebody, blame Donnie.
Get his own show. He is giving what is classically known as the snow job. Okay. This is baloney. He's drawing lines on paper, conclusions from stuff that's crazy. Please get another guest in here. Okay, get somebody else in here. I'll debate him on a different day by himself. He wants to hog this whole program. I got lots to do. Okay.
Look, Donnie, you asked me a question. I'm happy.
Donnie.
Okay, guys, I'm going to jump in because order in the court. So we're going to bring in somebody. We're going to bring.
Hang on, go back to the Y chromosome. Let's wrap that up, and then I'll peace out.
Donnie, you're the moderator. He's doing it again. Get a new guest. Get a new question, please, from somebody else. Okay, he can go get his own program. He's drawing lines on paper. He's giving us artwork. I'm not interested. I want science. Go ahead.
Dan, to be fair, we have gone for about 22 minutes with just you. Your points are technical, and so they require more time for you to explain. But we are 22 minutes.
Again, he doesn't get the message. He's not getting it. Okay, shut him off. Get somebody else. Go ahead.
Okay. To be fair, we're going to move to the next
sequence.
Okay. Like Dan, you are kind of interrupting here. Like they should just let it get back to where it was before they had Matt interject. That's what ruined this whole thing.
Which one's more similar, human, chip, or gorilla?
Donnie, do you understand? I would throw that student out of class. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, guys, we're going to be here for a couple hours after too, but you'll probably be sleeping. No worries. Okay, we're going to move on to Luca now. Brian, next on the panel. Appreciate your patience. How you been? And
great.
You had a question. Go ahead.
Well, originally I wanted to ask the other guy the question because he said that for some reason he said that he did that because Ken asked him if he believed that if you go back far enough, you think what was it, that we're related to elephants or something like that. And he said that he didn't believe that, which is kind of odd. So I was going to ask him why he said that, because usually most evolutionists would answer yes if it's an ultimate question of relationship. But in any given case, since everybody's on the similarity track, I would like to ask the evolutionists in the room, and Kent as well on that. If I know a lot of these guys don't believe in God, but from our perspective, do they not think that God could create?
Okay, this is 2 questions, and also you need to back your webcam up about 15 feet.
Different organisms with different variations of similarity and dissimilarity. Now that's from our perspective, but that's how we're looking at it. And so I was wondering if they would concede to that point that it is possible that God could have created with those types of variations with similarity and dissimilarity.
If it's my turn, God, I believe, created all the plants and animals with an amazing ability to produce a variety of offspring that can survive in different climates. There are dogs that can survive in the cold weather. There are dogs that cannot survive in the cold weather. There's dogs that can only survive in hot climates. We have dogs with long fur, long hair, some with short hair, some with skinny legs, some with fat legs. I think they're still dogs, and they had a common ancestor called a dog. So I think it would be wise for God to create all the animals with a gene code that contains variations within limits. It's always going to be a dog, but you might get a dog that's able to survive, Alaskan winters. And other animals simply could not survive that. If you turned all the Chihuahuas loose in Alaska out in the woods, none of them would be there in the spring. Okay, they'd all be dead. So they can't survive. So I think the fact that the animals have a gene code, and so do humans, by the way, for skin color and height and eye color and hair color, there's a variety. They're still human. The variations happen and they're limited to the same kind, which is exactly what I've always been saying. Show me an example where any animal or plant produced something that's a different kind. There are 8 varieties of squirrels. Probably had a common ancestor called a squirrel. That's to say a squirrel and a banana are related, though, is not science. It's a religious belief. That's why these charts they put in the textbook, humans and birds and reptiles and ladybugs having a common ancestor. This is propaganda. This is artwork. This isn't science. So, yes, Brian, I believe that variations can happen, certainly. And
so Kent said, I just want to respond to this. So Kent said that if you put Chihuahuas in Alaska, that they wouldn't survive until the spring. Well, the Chihuahua is a dog that was domesticated and raised in Mexico, which is a very hot, arid desert climate. So it's almost like animals adapt to the environment that they come from. And if you take them and put them in the complete opposite environment, they wouldn't survive. Yeah, what's your point? Like, what is your point?
And they're limited.
Brian, appreciate it. And you said you wanted one of the evolutionists to give their thoughts on that too, Brian, or was that just for Ken?
Just across the room if you want to.
Okay. Evolutionist leaning folks here would be Jackson Rowe. Good to have you, Jackson. I think you and Kent know each other.
Hey, what's going on, guys?
Debated about 50 times. And then Dr. Dan. So whoever wanted to answer that, feel free to go ahead.
I'd be happy to, but Jackson hasn't had time yet, so I'm happy to give him time.
Oh, it's all right. I'm feeling kind of bad because I just got back from my grandmother's and I ate way too much and I need to chill for a second. So I'll let Dr. Dan have that one.
Let that food digest a bit before engaging in the debate dojo, right, Jackson? Okay, Dan, go ahead.
Yeah. So right. So this is kind of what I was talking about before, that like under a common design or a creation model, you can say like we expect similarities based on function, based on morphology, whatever you want, just because the creator, the designer, whoever, right, made things that way at the beginning of the process, right? That's totally, yes, that is a legitimate hypothesis, and we can test that hypothesis. The way we test that is by looking at sequences that mutate without purifying selection, because those sequences shouldn't maintain that nested pattern over time because mutations are going to happen. Whereas sequences that are functional, that are limited, that are constrained, those are going to, maintain that pattern. So like you talk about a specific gene, right? Like opsins in the eyes is a good example where all eyes have opsins, and you make a nested hierarchy with eye opsins, and it basically follows the morphology for like worms and vertebrates and arthropods and mollusks, right? It basically follows the pattern you'd expect. But if you do the same thing for those same groups of organisms for regions that are not constrained, like introns in those same opsin genes, the introns specifically, then you don't get that. Then you under the creation model, you shouldn't get that pattern because those regions are just, they started separate. Even if they started identical, the way they would change since creation is going to be unrelated to each other, right? Because they are in actuality separate lineages without common ancestry. So they're going to be uncorrelated with each other. But in reality, we still find the same nested hierarchy. So yes, that is a legitimate hypothesis. We can test that, and the predictions that flow from it are not met.
Okay, Dan, thank you very much. Brian, if you had something follow up or to follow up with, or Kent, if you wanted to respond. Matt, I saw you unmute. So whoever would like to go next, go ahead.
I'm not convinced that I answered because in the creation model, okay, we would see that that God can create with a wide variety. Okay, to start with, of course, we got tons and tons of information to work off of, and we do believe in variations within a kind, and we also believe that God created all organisms with all sorts of similarities and differences. And so between kinds, for example, you can find similarities, but you can also find differences. And we don't know why that God created, with all those different differences and similarities, but we know that it exists. But within our paradigm, we do accept the fact that all organisms have similarities and dissimilarities. What we would probably reject is that such similarities automatically prove common descent of all life forms.
Okay, we're going to skip ahead a little bit. Thank you, Dr. Dan, for the timestamp. Just because I don't want the title of this video to be clickbait.
The areas that mute stuck with only you still builds a nest.
I'm willing to meet you halfway on that.
See, so you said the 41-minute mark? Because I'm watching your video, Dan. Let me see here. Sure, because it seems like Kent is gone at 41 minutes. Oh, let me rewind.
None of them would be there in the survive, able to survive,
I think you meant 31 minutes.
They're long survive, their ability to
That it is possible that God could have created with those types of variations with similarity and dissimilarity.
If it's my turn, God, I believe, created all the plants and animals with an amazing ability to produce a variety of offspring that can survive in different climates. There are dogs that can survive in the cold weather. There are dogs that cannot survive in the cold weather. There's dogs that can only survive in hot climates. We have dogs with long fur, long hair, some with short hair, some with skinny legs, some with fat legs. I think they're still dogs, and they had a common ancestor called a dog. So I think it would be wise for God to create all the animals with a gene code that contains variations within limits. It's always going to be a dog. But
not only does Kent say the same things all the time, like his script, he even says them with the same inflection. Like he says, God would make a gene code, the gene code, or the Hovind code.
But you might get a dog that's able to survive, Alaskan winters. And other animals simply could not survive that. If you turned all the Chihuahuas loose in Alaska out in the woods, none of them would be there in the spring.
You already said that.
Okay, they'd all be dead. So they can't survive. So I think the fact that the animals have a gene code, and so do humans, by the way, for skin color and height and
if the Chihuahuas could survive, would you say that evolution is true then?
Eye color and hair color. There's a variety. They're still human. The variations happen and they're limited to the same kind, which is exactly what I've always been saying. Show me an example where any animal or plant produced something that's a different kind.
Wolf to dog. Well, I guess they're the same, considered the same kind. But dogs and dingoes.
There are 8 varieties of squirrels. Probably had a common ancestor called a squirrel.
Hamsters and gerbils.
That's to say a squirrel and a banana are related, though, is not science. It's a religious belief. That's why these charts they put in the textbook, humans and birds and reptiles and ladybugs having a common ancestor. This is propaganda.
I liked during my debate when I asked Kent if something is religious, does that mean it's automatically not scientific? And he said, oh, well, my religion is perfectly scientific. Oh, okay, so you're the exception. Got it.
This is artwork. This isn't science. So, yes, Brian, I believe that variations can happen, certainly, and they're limited.
Brian, appreciate it. And you said you wanted one of the evolution.
Okay. We're going to jump to 36 minutes.
And I just don't see that somehow pointing to similarity would automatically vindicate the evolutionary perspective. To me, it seems like a kind of a error called confirmation bias, where you don't consider what the other side is actually saying, because technically speaking, the other side, the creationist side, also predicts similarity and dissimilarity. So and of course we also accept variations within a kind. So we can accept, for example, all the different kinds of breeds of dogs, and we can accept that wolves and dogs are related and that sort of thing. But we would not say.
Okay, Brian, I appreciate it. I do want to make sure Kent gets involved again.
Oh, yeah. I just wanted to get my perspective there. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go that long.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Donnie,
And I don't want to respond to the
I've
answer.
only got a few minutes left here, Donnie. So would you?
Yeah.
Dan obviously wants to monopolize the whole conversation. I told him to get his own show. I think he's got that. Go ahead and use it on your show. He keeps talking about these constrained sequences and stuff like that. This is all arbitrary stuff that man is doing to these animals and plants and creatures, looking at their DNA, trying to put them in this category and that category. They don't care. They know what their kind is.
It's not arbitrary because humans aren't affecting this. We're just observing how the DNA is actually structured. How is that arbitrary?
Cows make baby cows every time. To imagine that this is proof that cows are related to birds is stupid. It's not science. Don't teach it as science. We observe and we see that some people say 250, some say 450 breeds of cows. I don't care. The cows don't care. They look for another cow to mate with. They bring forth
No, they don't. Cows mate with bulls, Kent.
after their kind. This is all that's been observed. He wants to put them in different sequences and look at the gene code, and this one is similar to that one. The cows don't care. They might have a similar gene code to a pine tree. They're not going to try to mate with the pine tree. So the Bible so far has made this claim that they're going to bring forth after their kind. This has never been refuted.
Did Kent just admit that animals and plants have similarities in their DNA sequences?
I can't prove that it's always going to be that way, but so far that's all we've observed. Science, well, we can observe, study, test. I think the Bible made a real scientific statement when it said they will bring forth after their kind. That's all we've seen. And then they're going to argue, what's a kind? Well, here, species, definition of species.
I don't understand this. So you say they're gonna ask what's a kind. The definition of species is this. That's not the definition of kind, unless you're saying that a kind is a species, which you don't.
A kind. Oh, look at that. Synonyms for species. A kind. The whole argument about species and kind, that's what they're going to go to next. They always do, okay? They don't have a good definition of species. If they can bring forth, they're the same kind. Cows and pine trees cannot bring forth a baby. Cows and apples cannot bring forth a baby. They're a different kind. Is the cow and the buffalo the same kind? That's a good one. I think they made beefalo, so maybe they are the same kind. But their whole argument is they try to muddy the water, which is what he's going to try to do here in a second, and make so we've created these constrained sequences.
No, we did not create the constrained sequences. We're just observing how the DNA is structured, Kent.
Animals don't care how we constrain them or sequence them.
That's irrelevant, dude.
They know what their kind is. So,
well, maybe the cows can tell us then. We'll get fucking Dr. Doolittle to interview a cow, and then he can finally tell us what kind means.
And I'm out of gas, brother. I got just a few more minutes and got to go, but go ahead. Who's next?
Okay, let's now, to be fair, I know, well, we've got T-Rock, Jackson Rose, Centurion, Theo, but most here are now creationists. So I'm guessing, a quick question. At the 2-hour mark, again, we will still continue the open mic. So again, anyone's feel free to stay. And so why don't we, okay, you know what, Dan, to be fair, since you're one of the two evolutionists here, let's give you 1 minute to respond. Now, since we're really winding down, I'm going to feel free 1 minute to respond. Then we'll give it back to Kent for a minute. Okay.
That's fair. I don't have anything to say to Kent. Is he just doing his script? But I do have a question for, sorry, I just know Apologetics 101. I don't know your actual name. I apologize. It's nice to chat with you.
Brian.
Brian, so I just have a question because you were saying that God could create similarities and patterns and everything. All good. I just my clarifying question is it a one-time creation or is it an ongoing intervention as things diversify?
One-time creation, but I do think that God created us with a wide variety of information in there.
Okay, so it's a one-time thing without subsequent intervention after creation, just to be clear. Okay, cool. Thanks. That's it. That's all I wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Thank you, Brian.
But before we go on more on that one,
Okay, so we are going to skip forward to Dr. Dan's final comments, and then I think we're going to wrap the stream up, guys. So thank you so much to the people in the side chat. Got about 83 people watching. And be sure to like this video if you're watching the replay, and leave me a comment telling what you thought of Dr. Dan's performance. I think it's unfortunate that there wasn't a more focused debate between him and Dr. Dan, but this is the unfortunate side effect of these open mic debates. I would encourage Dan, like, I know, you know, it's not always the best idea to debate Kent, but I would love to see a debate with him where it's just you and him for like an hour, like my last debate with Kent. I know that's very mentally taxing, but I would just like tell Donnie, like, I want a block of time where it's just me and Kent, and then after that Kent can leave and you can bring in the other people, because this thing of having people interject in between the debate just doesn't work for me. Okay, so we're going to watch Dr. Dan's final comments where he calls out SFT for hosting Kent.
I don't think I'm going to convince anybody of that, but
well, that's quite a negative.
I'm happy we're able to get to that point.
Just confirm Matt is back. So Dan, to be fair, if you did have a question.
Let me just finish.
Yeah, this is a little bit behind, pulling back the curtain on the nuts and bolts of all this stuff a little bit. But my question is this: we've been sitting here chatting about this stuff with constrained and unconstrained sequences, and we've had I think a really good conversation about it. We're really digging into the weeds, and it's been an excellent conversation, getting into some really technical nitty gritty here. My question is this: this type of conversation is not possible with Kent because he doesn't know anything. He doesn't understand any of what's being talked about here. Why do you still give him the time of day? Like, he doesn't know any of this stuff. Last time I was here, he said the thing about the recombination is mom's unzips and dad's unzips and they wind up together. And Donnie, you know that's nonsense. You know that's not how that works, right? Like, why do you still waste the first hour on that, and then however long in the open mic with him there? It just makes it impossible to have any kind of conversation because he doesn't know anything.
I can answer that question for you. Same reason modern day debate invites flat earthers and Christians to make fun of them.
Well, let's be nice to people who aren't here. I think we all have our specialties. I think we all have the areas.
Because Kent is so nice when he talks about other people on his videos.
That we focus on and understand the best. Matt and I, for example, we like to study the genetics topic because, Dan, as I think you would agree, the best possible evidence for common descent is in the world of genetics. I really believe that. And so that's the topic I like to focus on the most, and so we enjoy a good debate, and Kent's specialty may not be in the world of genetics, but I think he's got his own set of
he doesn't have a specialty. His specialty is shitty dad jokes.
Specialties, and I think he's a good debater, makes for a fun debate, entertaining debate. We like to get people in the ring, so Matt, what's your answer? And then Dan, sure, you can respond.
I think Dan triggers him too, because he said he's just reading a script again,
which is true. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong.
Well, then he's mad. So then he's not even listening to your
Well,
question.
Dan and
and
Kent,
then
they got a
bam.
love-hate relationship, so they're good at
Yeah,
triggering
they
each
do.
other. Or
No, I mean,
Dan's
that
triggering
was a
them.
good example though, right? Because I asked, the way I approach this, and Donnie and everyone here knows this, the way I approach this is I start like, I try to establish a common foundation of just like definitions, right? Like, do we agree that this is what this means and this thing exists, right? And I couldn't even get that without him going to his stupid script on DNA complexity, right? And it was completely irrelevant. It was just pluck out a couple buzzwords in what I said and like find the part of his script that sounded like it was related to that.
It's totally 100% true. Very accurate description of events, of what happened there. Very, very good.
It's like it's impossible to have the kind of conversation we just had when he's present in the room. And it's like, Donnie, I see what you're trying to do with these open mics, and I will tell you, I appreciate it. And I wouldn't be here if I didn't think that this kind of conversation was valuable, right?
So this is really the obvious reason that he has Kent on, is because Kent brings in the views. I mean, it's no secret. Content with about and with Kent Hovind gets a lot of viewership because you have Kent Hovind's fans and you have the people who dislike Kent, who enjoy seeing him squirm in debates and get wrecked on. It's a whole genre on YouTube. Like, that's pretty much what I do on my channel, and I've been very successful. So thank you so much to the people who watch my videos. Kent and other people have a huge problem with that I make videos that are mostly about Kent Hovind. But YouTube, I've defended myself about this a billion times, but YouTube, you find a niche and you find out what works, and then you make videos about it. So I'm not gonna like those people are just mad because my videos get views, and they are fans of Kent. So they don't like that, But this is the reason that he has Kent on, maybe out of some misguided sense of loyalty, but it's certainly not for his scientific contributions. I mean, obviously.
But like, why do we preface it with 2 hours of that? Right? That is essentially wasted time where there can be no constructive, detailed conversation like the one we're having. And I get that it's a spectacle and that's fine and like all good. But like, even tonight, when I popped in about 30 minutes into the debate part, there were only 100 people here watching. It wasn't even like it's bringing 500 or 800 or 1,000 people to watch Kent anymore. So like, what's the value in like wasting everyone's time letting Kent recite his script for the 100th time?
Hey, 100 viewers is a good amount. That's about what I get on my live streams on a good day. So,
Well, I appreciate the feedback. I can speak for Matt and myself. I can't necessarily speak for Kent, but we like to dig deep into these topics. These are the topics we like to focus on. And so I enjoy going into the nitty gritty. And that's usually what we do at these open mics, is after the first 2 hours. Last week we dug deep in the hominin fossil record with Gutsy Gibbon was here. Is an excellent time. Week before that, we got into some other heavy topics related to, the age of the earth and so on. So I guess within the 5-hour open mics, we get a little mix of everything, and then that's why me and whoever the host is, we'll make sure we stick around for 4 to 5 hours to allow anybody who wants to join and whatever topic people want to discuss. Like in this instance, Dan, I had a really good time discussing this topic is a great topic. And so I've had a lot of fun, and I'm glad that we've had the time to discuss it.
That's fair. And I'm gonna head out because I've been taking up a lot of time here, and I appreciate all the time you've been giving me. But I just want you to think about the cost benefit here, because I could see the argument if you go back like 2 or 3 years when kind of the YouTube, especially like with the pandemic, people are spending a lot more time online. The debate scene drew a lot of eyeballs, right? I don't know what your views were for an average Kent debate, but it was, it was up there. It was drawing a crowd. And, like, I haven't been paying attention for the last few months, but I popped in just over the last couple weeks to see a couple of these. And like, the numbers are not what they used to be anymore. So like, I hear.
I mean, my last debate with Kent got 20K on my channel, just saying. But that's a good debate. A lot of the debates with Kent kind of suck.
you know, everyone has their strengths, everyone has the thing that they focus on. I feel like Ken's strength is the spectacles. People are saying in the chat right now, it's drawing a crowd. But like it doesn't do that anymore. So if the goal is to draw a crowd, that's not doing it. If the goal is to have an in-depth conversation, his lack of understanding of this stuff, which I mean, people are going to say that's mean, but like, tell me I'm wrong, everybody. Tell me Kent does actually have the ability to have the conversation that we've just been having for the last couple of hours. He just objectively doesn't.
I mean,
He doesn't
I
know.
I will say,
So that was my conversation about universal common ancestry and what I think is the best evidence for it with Kent and SFT and RawMat, and there were some other people in there too. Hope you all enjoyed that. Thanks for watching. Don't get fooled.
All right. Great video from Dr. Dan. Thank you so much, Dan, for contributing in the chat also. I appreciate that a lot because having the timestamps really helped me skip around because it's a long video, and with these type of open mics, it's always a lot of, you know, kind of fluff that you have to cut out. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you so much to people watching in the side chat, people watching the replay. Again, be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you want to support my channel past just subscribing, watching the videos and liking them, you can consider going to my Patreon. It's patreon.com/atheistjr, atheistjr. And consider donating as little as $1 per month, because every donation helps, and I really appreciate. Again, thank you guys so much for watching my debate with Kent. 20K views is awesome. It's like the 3rd highest viewed video on my channel. Thank you guys so much for the support. I really appreciate it. And hopefully I'll be making more content. I know I've kind of been slacking because, again, I fell behind because I've been playing Starfield. Very addictive game. But thank you guys so much. I'll just see you guys in the next video. Peace out.